Chapter 9 of Nina Balatka by Anthony Trollope. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Anthony Ogus. Nina's misery as she went home was almost complete. She had not indeed quarrelled with her lover, who had again caressed her as she left him and assured her of his absolute confidence, but she had undertaken a task against which her very soul revolted. It gave her no comfort to say to herself that she had undertaken to look for that which she knew she would not find, and that therefore her search could do no harm. She had in truth consented to become a spy upon her father, and was so to do in furtherance of the views of one who suspected her father of fraud, and who had not scrupled to tell her that her father was dishonest. Now again she thought of St. Nicholas as she heard the dull chime of the clock from the saint's tower, and found herself forced to acknowledge that she was doing very wickedly in loving a Jew. Of course troubles would come upon her. What else could she expect? Had she not endeavoured to throw behind her and to trample under foot all that she had learned from her infancy under the guidance of St. Nicholas? Of course the saint would desert her. The very sound of the chime told her that he was angry with her. How could she hope again that St. John would be good to her? Was it not to be expected that the black flowing river over which she understood him to preside would become her enemy and would swallow her up, as Lotta Luxa had predicted? Before she returned home, when she was quite sure that Anton Trendellsohn had already passed over, she went down upon the bridge and far enough along the causeway to find herself over the river, and there, crouching down, she looked at the rapid running silent black stream beneath her. The waters were very silent and very black, but she could still see or feel that they were running rapidly, and they were cold too. She herself at the present moment was very cold. She shuddered as she looked down, pressing her face against the stonework, with her two hands resting on two of the pillars of the parapet. It would be very terrible. She did not think that she much cared for death. The world had been so hard to her, and was growing so much harder, that it would be a good thing to get away from it. If she could become ill and die, with a good kind nun standing by her bedside, and with the cross pressed to her bosom, and with her eyes fixed on the sweet face of the Virgin Mother as it was painted in the little picture in her room, in that way she thought that death might even be grateful. But to be carried away she knew not whither in the cold silent black flowing Moldau. And yet she half believed the prophecy of Lotta. Such a quiet death as that she had pictured to herself could not be given to her. What nun would come to her bedside, to the bed of a girl who had declared to all Prague that she intended to marry a Jew? For weeks past she had feared even to look at the picture of the Virgin. "I'm afraid you'll think I am very late, father," she said as soon as she reached home. Her father muttered something, but not angrily, and she soon busied herself about him, doing some little thing for his comfort, as was her wont. But as she did so she could not but remember that she had undertaken to be a spy upon him, to secrete his key, and to search surreptitiously for that which he was supposed to be keeping fraudulently. As she sat by him empty-handed, for it was Sunday night, and as a Christian she never worked with a needle upon the Sunday, she told herself that she could not do it. Could there be any harm done were she to ask him now openly what papers he kept in that desk? But she desired to obey her lover where obedience was possible, and he had expressly forbidden her to ask any such question. She sat therefore and said no word that could tend to ease her suffering, and then, when the time came, she went suffering to her bed. On the next day there seemed to come to her no opportunity for doing that which she had to do. Souchey was in and out of the house all the morning, explaining to her that they had almost come to the end of the flour and of the potatoes which he had bought, that he himself had swallowed on the previous evening the last tip of the great sausage, for, as he had alleged, it was no use a fellow dying of starvation outright, and that there was hardly enough of chocolate left to make 3 cups. Nina had brought out her necklace and had asked Souchey to take it to the shop and do the best with it he could, but Souchey had declined the commission, alleging that he would be accused of having stolen it, and Nina had then prepared to go herself, but her father had called her, and he had come out into the sitting room and had remained there during the afternoon, so that both the sale of the trinket and the search in the desk had been postponed. The latter she might have done at night, but when the night came the deed seemed to be more horrid than it would be even in the day. She observed also more accurately than she had ever done before that he always carried the key of his desk with him. He did not indeed put it under his pillow or conceal it in bed, but he placed it with an old spectacle case which he always carried, and a little worn pocket book which Nina knew to be empty, on a low table which stood at his bed head. And now during the whole of the afternoon he had the key on the table beside him. Nina did not doubt but that she could take the key while he was asleep, for when he was even half asleep, which was perhaps his most customary state, he would not stir when she entered the room. But if she took it at all, she would do so in the day. She could not bring herself to creep into the room in the night and to steal the key in the dark. As she lay in bed she still thought of it. She had promised her lover that she would do this thing. Should she resolve not to do it, in spite of that promise, she must at any rate tell Anton of her resolution. She must tell him, and then there would be an end of everything. Would it be possible for her to live without her love? On the following morning it occurred to her that she might perhaps be able to induce her father to speak of the houses, and of those horrid documents of which she had heard so much, without disobeying any of Trendellsohn's behests. There could, she thought, be no harm in her asking her father some question as to the ownership of the houses, and as to the Jew's right to the property. Her father had very often declared in her presence that old Trendellsohn could turn him into the street at any moment. There had been no secrets between her and her father as to their poverty, and there could be no reason why her tongue should now be silenced so long as she refrained from any positive disobedience to her lover's commands. That he must be obeyed she still recognised as the strongest rule of all, obeyed, that is, till she should go to him and lay down her love at his feet, and give back to him the troth which he had given her. "Father," she said to the old man about noon that day, "I suppose this house does belong to the Trendellsohns?" "Of course it does," said he crossly. "Belongs to them altogether, I mean?" she said. "I don't know what you call altogether. It does belong to them, and there's an end of it. What's the good of talking about it?" "Only if so, they ought to have those deeds they are so anxious about. Everybody ought to have what is his own. Don't you think so, father?" "I'm keeping nothing from them," said he. "You don't suppose that I want to rob them?" "Of course you do not." Then Nina paused again. She was drawing perilously near to forbidden ground, if she were not standing on it already. And yet she was very anxious that the subject should not be dropped between her and her father. "I'm sure you do not want to rob any one, father, but..." "But what? I suppose young Trendellsohn has been talking to you again about it. I suppose he suspects me. If so, no doubt you will suspect me too." "Oh, father, how can you be so cruel?" "If he thinks the papers are here, it is his own house. Let him come and search for them." "He will not do that, I'm sure." "What is it he wants, then? I can't go out to your uncle and make him give them up." "They are then with uncle?" "I suppose so. But how am I to know? You see how they treat me. I cannot go to them, and they never come to me, except when that woman comes to scold." "But they can't belong to uncle." "Of course they don't." "Then why should he keep them? What good can they do him? When I spoke to Ziska, Ziska said they should be kept because Trendellsohn is a Jew. But surely a Jew has a right to his own. We at any rate ought to do what we can for him, Jew as he is, since he lets us live in his house." The slight touch of irony which Nina had thrown into her voice when she spoke of what was due to her lover, even though he was a Jew, was not lost upon her father. "Of course you would take his part against a Christian," he said. "I take no one's part against any one," said she, "except so far as right is concerned. If we take a Jew's money, I think we should give him the thing which he purchases." "Who is keeping him from it?" said Balatka angrily. "Well, I suppose it is my uncle," replied Nina. "Why cannot you let me be at peace then?" Having so said, he turned himself round to the wall, and Nina felt herself to be in a worse position than ever. There was nothing now for her but to take the key, or else to tell her lover that she would not obey him. There could be no further hope in diplomacy. She had just resolved that she could not take the key, that in spite of her promise she could not bring herself to treat her father after such fashion as that, when the old man turned suddenly round upon her again and went back to the subject. "I have got a letter somewhere from Karil Zamenoy," said he, "telling me that the deed is in his own chest." "Have you, father?" said she, anxiously, but struggling to repress her anxiety. "I had it, I know. It was written ever so long ago, before I had settled with the Trendlesohns. But I have seen it often since. Take the key and unlock the desk, and bring me the bundle of papers that are tied with an old tape. Or, stop, bring me all the papers." With trembling hand Nina took the key. She was now desired by her father to do exactly that which her lover wished her to have done, or, better still, her father was about to do the thing himself. She would at any rate have positive proof that the paper was not in her father's desk. He had desired her to bring all the papers, so that there would be no doubt left. She took the key very gently, as softly as was possible to her, and went slowly into the other room. When there, she unlocked the desk and took out the bundle of letters tied with an old tape, which lay at the top ready to her hand. Then she collected together the other papers, which were not many, and without looking at them carried them to her father. She studiously avoided any scrutiny of what there might be, even by so much as a glance of her eye. "This seems to be all there is, father, except one or two old account books." He took the bundle, and with feeble hands untied the tape and moved the documents one by one. Nina felt that she was fully warranted in looking at them now, as her father was in fact showing them to her. In this way she will be able to give evidence in his favour without having had recourse to any ignoble practice. The old man moved every paper in the bundle, and she could see that they were all letters. She had understood that the deed for which Trendellsohn had desired her to search was written on a larger paper than any she now saw, and that she might thus know it at once. There was certainly no such deed among the papers which her father slowly turned over, and which he slowly proceeded to tie up again with the old tape. "I am sure I saw it the other day," he said, fingering among the loose papers, while Nina looked on with anxious eyes. Then at last he found the letter from Karil Zamenoy, and having read it himself, gave it her to read. It was dated 7 or 8 years back, at a time when Balatka was only on his way to ruin, not absolutely ruined, as was the case with him now, and contained an offer on Zamenoy's part to give safe custody to certain documents which were named, and among which the deed now sought for stood first. "And has he got all those other papers?" Nina asked. "No, he has none of them unless he has this. There is nothing left but this one that the Jew wants." "And Uncle Karil has never given that back?" "Never." "And it should belong to Stephen Trendellsohn?" "Yes, I suppose it should." "Who can wonder then that they should be anxious and inquire after it, and make a noise about it? Will not the law make Uncle Karil give it up?" "How can the law prove that he has got it? I know nothing about the law. Put them all back again." Then Nina replaced the papers and locked the desk. She had at any rate been absolutely and entirely successful in her diplomacy, and would be able to assure Anton Trendellsohn of her knowledge that that which he sought was not in her father's keeping. On the same day she went out to sell her necklace. She waited till it was nearly dark, till the first dusk of evening had come upon the street, and then she crossed the bridge and hurried to a jeweller's shop in the Grosser Ring, which she had observed, and which she knew such trinkets as hers were customarily purchased. The Grosser Ring is an open space, such as we call a square, in the oldest part of the town, and in it stand the town hall and the Teinkirche, which may be regarded as the most special church in Prague, as there for many years were taught the doctrines of Huss, the great reformer of Bohemia. Here in the Grosser Ring there was generally a crowd of an evening, as Nina knew, and she thought that she could go in and out of the jeweller's shop without observation. She believed that she might be able to borrow money on her treasure, leaving it as a deposit, and this, if possible, she would do. There were regular pawnbrokers in the town, by whom no questions would be made, who of course would lend her money in the ordinary way of their trade. But she believed that such people would advance to her but a very small portion of the value of her necklace, and then, if, as would be too probable, she could not redeem it, the necklace would be gone, and gone without a price. Yes, it is my own, altogether my own, my very own. She had to explain all the circumstances to the jeweller, and at last, with a view of quelling any suspicion, she told the jeweller what was her name, and explained how poor were the circumstances of her house. "But you must be the niece of Madame Zamenoy in the Windberggasse," said the jeweller. And then, when Nina with hesitation acknowledged that such was the case, the man asked her why she did not go to her rich aunt, instead of selling a trinket which must be so valuable. "No," said Nina, "I cannot do that. If you will lend me something of its value, I shall be so much obliged to you." "But Madame Zamenoy would surely help you." "We will not take it from her. But we will not speak of that, sir. Can I have the money?" Then the jeweller gave her a receipt for the necklace, and took her receipt for the sum he lent her. It was more than Nina had expected, and she rejoiced that she had so well completed her business. Nevertheless, she wished that the jeweller had known nothing of her aunt. She was hardly out of the shop before she met her cousin Ziska, and she so met him that she could not escape him. She heard his voice, indeed, almost as soon as she recognised him, and had stopped at his summons before she had calculated whether it might not be better to run away. "What, Nina, is that you?" said Ziska, taking her hand before she knew how to refuse it to him. "Yes, it is I," said Nina. "What are you doing here?" "Why should I not be in the Grosser Ring as well as another? It is open to rich and poor." "So is Rapinski's shop, but poor people do not generally have much to do there." Rapinski was the name of the jeweller who had advanced the money to Nina. "No, not much," said Nina. "What little they have to sell is soon sold." "And have you been selling anything?" "Nothing of yours, Ziska." "But have you been selling anything?" "Why do you ask me? What business is it of yours?" "They say that Anton Trendellsohn, the Jew, gives you all that you want," said Ziska. "Then they say lies," said Nina, her eyes flashing fire upon her Christian lover through the gloom of the evening. "Who says so? You say so. No one else would be mean enough to be so false." "All Prague says so." "All Prague! I know what that means. And did all Prague go to the Jews' quarter last Saturday to tell Anton Trendellsohn that the paper which he wants and which is his own was in father's keeping? Was it all Prague told that falsehood also?" There was a scorn in her face as she spoke which distressed Ziska greatly, but which he did not know how to meet or how to answer. He wanted to be brave before her, and he wanted also to show his affection for her, if only he knew how to do so without making himself humble in her presence. "Shall I tell you, Nina, why I went to the Jews' quarter on Saturday?" "No, tell me nothing. I wish to hear nothing from you. I know enough without your telling me." "I wish to save you, if it be possible, because I love you." And I never wish to see you again, because I hate you. I hate you because you have been cruel. But let me tell you this. Poor as we are, I have never taken a farthing of Anton's money. When I am his wife, as I hope to be, I will take what he gives me as though it came from heaven. From you, I would sooner die in the street than take a crust of bread from you." Then she darted from him, and succeeded in escaping without hearing the words with which he had replied to her angry taunts. She was woman enough to understand that her keenest weapon for wounding him would be an expression of unbounded love and confidence as to the man who was his rival. And therefore, though she was compelled to deny that she had lived on the charity of her lover, she had coupled her denial with an assurance of her faith and affection, which was no doubt bitter enough in Ziska's ears. "I do believe that she is witched," he said, as he turned away towards his own house. And then he reflected wisely on the backward tendency of the world in general, and regretted much that there was no longer given to priests in Bohemia the power of treating with salutary ecclesiastical severity patient suffering in the way in which his cousin Nina was afflicted. Nina had hardly got out of the Grosso Ring into the narrow street which leads from thence towards the bridge, when she encountered her other lover. He was walking slowly down the centre of the street when she passed him, or would have passed him, had she not recognised his figure through the gloom. "Anton," she said, coming up to him and touching his arm as lightly as was possible, "I am so glad to meet you here." "Nina!" "Yes, Nina." "And what have you been doing?" "I don't know that I want to tell you, only that I like to tell you everything." "If so, you can tell me this." Nina, however, hesitated. "If you have secrets, I do not want to inquire into them," said the Jew. "I would rather have no secrets from you, only..." "Only what?" "Well, I will tell you. I had a necklace, and we are not very rich, you know, at home, and I wanted to get something for father, and..." "You have sold it?" "No, I have not sold it. The man was very civil, indeed quite kind, and he lent me some money." "But the kind man kept the necklace, I suppose?" "Of course he kept the necklace. You would not have me borrow money from a stranger and leave him nothing." "No, I would not have you do that. But why not borrow from one who is no stranger?" "I do not want to borrow at all," said Nina in her lowest tone. "Are you ashamed to come to me in your trouble?" "Yes," said Nina. "I should be ashamed to come to you for money. I would not take it from you." He did not answer her at once, but walked on slowly while she kept close to his side. "Give me the jeweller's docket," he said at last. Nina hesitated for a moment, and then he repeated his demand in a sterner voice. "Nina, give me the jeweller's docket." Then she put her hand in her pocket and gave it him. She was very averse to doing so, but she was more averse to refusing him aught that he asked of her. "I have got something to tell you, Anton," she said, as soon as he had put the jeweller's paper into his purse. "Well, what is it?" "I have seen every paper and every morsel of everything that is in father's desk, and there is no sign of the deed you want." "And how did you see them?" "He showed them to me." "You told him, then, what I had said to you?" "No, I told him nothing about it. He gave me the key and desired me to fetch him all the papers. He wanted to find a letter which Uncle Karil wrote him ever so long ago. In that letter Uncle Karil acknowledges that he has the deed." "I do not doubt that in the least." "And what is it you do doubt, Anton?" "I do not say I doubt anything." "Do you doubt me, Anton?" There was a little pause before he answered her, the slightest moment of hesitation. But had it been but half as much, Nina's ear and Nina's heart would have detected it. "No," said Anton, "I am not saying that I doubt any one." "If you doubt me, you will kill me. I am at any rate true to you. What is it you want? What is it you think?" "They tell me that the document is in the house in the Kleinseite." "Who are they? Who is it that tells you?" "More than one. Your uncle and aunt said so, and Ziska Zamenoy came to me on purpose to repeat the same." And would you believe what Ziska says? I have hardly thought it worth my while to tell you that Ziska... To tell me what of Ziska? That Ziska pretends to want that I should be his wife. I would not look at him if there were not another man in Prague. I hate him. He is a liar. Would you believe Ziska? And another has told me. Another? Said Nina, considering. Yes, another. Lotta Luxa, I suppose. Never mind. They say indeed that it is you who have the deed. And you believe them? No, I do not believe them. But why do they say so? Must I explain that? How can I tell? Anton, do you not believe that the woman who loves you will be true to you? Then he paused again. Nina, sometimes I think that I have been mad to love a Christian. What have I been then? But I do love you, Anton. I love you better than all the world. I care nothing for Jew or Christian. When I think of you, I care nothing for heaven or earth. You are everything to me, because I love you. How could I deceive you? Nina, Nina, my own one, he said. And as I love you, so do you love me? Say that you love me also. I do, said he. I love you as I love my own soul. Then they parted, and Nina, as she went home, tried to make herself happy with the assurance which had been given to her by the last words her lover had spoken. But still there remained with her that suspicion of a doubt which, if it really existed, would be so cruel an injury to her love. End of chapter 9. Chapter 10 of Nina Balatka by Anthony Trollope. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Anthony Ogus. Some days passed on after the visit to the jeweller's shop, perhaps 10 or 12, before Nina heard from or saw her lover again, and during that time she had no tidings from her relatives in the Windberggasse. Life went on very quietly in the old house, and not the less quietly because the proceeds of the necklace saved Nina from any further immediate necessity of searching for money. The cold weather had come, or rather weather that was cold in the morning and cold in the evening, and old Balatka kept his bed altogether. His state was such that no one could say why he should not get up and dress himself, and he himself continued to speak of some future time when he would do so. But there he was, lying in his bed, and Nina told herself that in all probability she would never see him about the house again. For herself, she was becoming painfully anxious that some day should be fixed for her marriage. She knew that she was herself ignorant in such matters, and she knew also that there was no woman near her from whom she could seek counsel. Were she to go to some matron of the neighbourhood, her neighbour would only rebuke her, because she loved a Jew. She had boldly told her relatives of her love, and by doing so had shut herself out from all assistance from them. From even her father she could get no sympathy, though with him her engagement had become so far a thing sanctioned that he had ceased to speak of it in words of reproach. But when was it to be? She had more than once made up her mind that she would ask her lover, but her courage had never as yet mounted high enough in his presence to allow her to do so. When he was with her, their conversation always took such a turn that before she left him she was happy enough if she could only draw from him an assurance that he was not forgetting to love her. Of any final time for her marriage he never said a word. In the meantime she and her father might starve. They could not live on the price of a necklace for ever. She had not made up her mind, she never could make up her mind, as to what might be best for her father when she should be married. But she had made up her mind that when that happy time should come, she would simply obey her husband. He would tell her what would be best for her father. But in the meantime there was no word of her marriage, and now she had been 10 days in the Kleinseite without once having had so much as a message from her lover. How was it possible that she should continue to live in such a condition as this? She was sitting one morning very forlorn in the big parlour, looking out upon the birds who were pecking among the dust in the courtyard below, when her eye just caught the drapery of the dress of some woman who had entered the arched gateway. Nina, from her place by the window, could see out through the arch, and no one therefore could come through their gate while she was at her seat without passing under her eye. But on this occasion the birds had distracted her attention, and she had not caught a sight of the woman's face or figure. Could it be her aunt come to torture her again, her and her father? She knew that Souchey was downstairs, hanging somewhere in idleness about the door, and therefore she did not leave her place. If it were indeed her aunt might come up there to seek her, or it might possibly be Lotta Luxa, who, next to her aunt, was of all women the most disagreeable to Nina. Lotta, indeed, was not so hard to bear as Aunt Sophie, because Lotta could be answered sharply, and could be told to go, if matters proceeded to extremities. In such a case Lotta no doubt would not go, but still the power of desiring her to do so was much. Then Nina remembered that Lotta never wore her petticoat so full as was the morsel of drapery which she had seen. And as she thought of this, there came a low knock at the door. Nina, without rising, desired the stranger to come in. Then the door was gently opened, and Rebecca Loth, the Jewess, stood before her. Nina had seen Rebecca, but had never spoken to her. Each girl had heard much of the other from their younger friend Ruth Jacobi. Ruth was very intimate with them both, and Nina had been willing enough to be told of Rebecca, as had Rebecca also to be told of Nina. "Grandfather wants Anton to marry Rebecca," Ruth had said more than once, and thus Nina knew well that Rebecca was her rival. "I think he loves her better than his own eyes," Ruth had said to Rebecca, speaking of her uncle and Nina. But Rebecca had heard from 1,000 sources of information that he was to have been her lover, had forgotten his own people and his own religion, and had given himself to a Christian girl. Each therefore now knew that she looked upon an enemy and a rival, but each was anxious to be very courteous to her enemy. Nina rose from her chair directly she saw her visitor, and came forward to meet her. "I suppose you hardly know who I am, Fräulein?" said Rebecca. "Oh yes," said Nina, with her pleasantest smile. "You are Rebecca Loth." "Yes, I am Rebecca Loth, the Jewess." "I like the Jews," said Nina. Rebecca was not dressed now as she had been dressed on that gala occasion when we saw her in the Jews' quarter. Then she had been as smart as white muslin and bright ribbons and velvet could make her. Now she was clad almost entirely in black, and over her shoulders she wore a dark shawl, drawn closely round her neck. But she had on her head, now as then, that peculiar Hungarian hat, which looks almost like a coronet in front, and gives an aspect to the girl who wears it half defiant and half attractive. And there were there, of course, the long, glossy black curls, and the dark blue eyes, and the turn of the face, which was so completely Jewish in its hard, bold, almost repellent beauty. Nina had said that she liked the Jews, but when the words were spoken she remembered that they might be open to misconstruction, and she blushed. The same idea occurred to Rebecca, but she scorned to take advantage of even a successful rival on such a point as that. She would not twit Nina by any hint that this assumed liking for the Jews was simply a special predilection for one Jew in particular. "We are not ungrateful to you for coming among us and knowing us," said Rebecca. Then there was a slight pause, for Nina hardly knew what to say to her visitor. But Rebecca continued to speak. "We hear that in other countries the prejudice against us is dying away, and that Christians stay with Jews in their houses, and Jews with Christians, eating with them and drinking with them. I fear it will never be so in Prague." "And why not in Prague? I hope it may. Why should we not do in Prague as they do elsewhere?" "Ah, the feeling is so firmly settled here. We have our own quarter, and live altogether apart. A Christian here will hardly walk with a Jew, unless it be from counter to counter, or from bank to bank. As for their living together, or even eating in the same room, do you ever see it?" Nina, of course, understood the meaning of this. That which the girl said to her was intended to prove to her how impossible it was that she should marry a Jew, and live in Prague with a Jew as his wife. But she who stood her ground before Aunt Sophie, who had never flinched for a moment before all the threats which could be showered upon her from the Christian side, was not going to quail before the opposition of a Jewess, and that Jewess a rival. "I do not know why we should not live to see it," said Nina. "It must take long first, very long," said Rebecca. "Even now, Fräulein, I fear you will think that I am very intrusive in coming to you. I know that a Jewess has no right to push her acquaintance upon a Christian girl." The Jewess spoke very humbly of herself and of her people, but in every word she uttered there was a slight touch of irony which was not lost upon Nina. Nina could not but bethink herself that she was poor, so poor that everything around her, on her, and about her told of poverty, while Rebecca was very rich, and showed her wealth even in the sombre garments which she had chosen for her morning visit. No idea of Nina's poverty had crossed Rebecca's mind, but Nina herself could not but remember it when she felt the sarcasm implied in her visitor's self-humiliation. "I am glad that you have come to me, very glad indeed, if you have come in friendship." Then she blushed as she continued. "To me, situated as I am, the friendship of a Jewish maiden would be a treasure indeed." "You intend to speak of—" "I speak of my engagement with Anton Trendellsohn. I do so with you because I know that you have heard of it. You tell me that Jews and Christians cannot come together in Prague, but I mean to marry a Jew. A Jew is my lover. If you will say that you will be my friend, I will love you indeed. Ruth Jacobi is my friend, but then Ruth is so young. Yes, Ruth is very young. She is a child. She knows nothing. A child's friendship is better than none. Ruth is very young. She cannot understand. I too love Ruth Jacobi. I have known her since she was born. I knew and loved her mother. You do not remember Ruth Trendellsohn. No, your acquaintance with them is only of the other day." "Ruth's mother has been dead 7 years," said Nina. "And what are 7 years? I have known them for 24. "Nay, that cannot be. But I have. That is my age, and I was born, so to say, in their arms. Ruth Trendellsohn was 10 years older than I. Only 10. "And Anton? Anton was a year older than his sister. But you know Anton's age. Has he never told you his age?" "I never asked him, but I know it. There are things one knows as a matter of course. I remember his birthday always. It has been a short always." "No, not so short. 2 years is not a short time to know a friend." "But he has not been betrothed to you for 2 years." "No, not betrothed to me." "Nor has he loved you so long, nor you him." "For him I can only speak of the time when he first told me so." "And that was but the other day, but the other day as I count the time." To this Nina made no answer. She could not claim to have known her lover from so early a date as Rebecca Loth had done, who had been, as she said, born in the arms of his family. But what of that? Men do not always love best those women whom they have known the longest. Anton Trendellsohn had known her long enough to find that he loved her best. Why then should this Jewish girl come to her and throw in her teeth the shortness of her intimacy with the man who was to be her husband? If she, Nina, had also been a Jewess, Rebecca Loth would not then have spoken in such a way. As she thought of this, she turned her face away from the stranger, and looked out among the sparrows who were still pecking among the dust in the court. She had told Rebecca at the beginning of their interview that she would be delighted to find a friend in a Jewess, but now she felt sorry that the girl had come to her. For Anton's sake she would bear with much from one whom he had known so long, but for that thought she would have answered her visitor with short courtesy. As it was, she sat silent and looked out upon the birds. "I have come to you now," said Rebecca Loth, "to say a few words to you about Anton Trendellsohn. I hope you will not refuse to listen." "That will depend on what you say." "Do you think it will be for his good to marry a Christian?" "I shall leave him to judge of that," replied Nina sharply. "It cannot be that you do not think of it. I am sure you would not willingly do an injury to the man you love." "I would die for him, if that would serve him." "You can serve him without dying. If he takes you for his wife, all his people will turn against him. His own father will become his enemy." "How can that be?" His father knows of it, and yet he is not my enemy. It is as I tell you. His father will disinherit him. Every Jew in Prague will turn his back upon him. He knows it now. Anton knows it himself, but he cannot be the first to say the word that shall put an end to your engagement." "Jews have married Christians in Prague before now," said Nina, pleading her own cause with all the strength she had. "But not such a one as Anton Trendellsohn. An unconsidered man may do that which is not permitted to those who are more in note. There is no law against it now. That is true. There is no law. But there are habits stronger than law. In your own case, do you not know that all the friends you have in the world will turn their backs upon you? And so it will be with him. You two will be alone, neither as Jews nor as Christians, with none to aid you, with no friend to love you." "For myself I care nothing," said Nina. "They may say, if they like, that I am no Christian." "But how will it be with him? Can you ever be happy if you have been the cause of ruin to your husband?" Nina was again silent for a while, sitting with her face turned altogether away from the Jewess. Then she rose suddenly from her chair, and facing round almost fiercely upon the other girl, asked a question which came from the fullness of her heart. "And you yourself, what is it that you intend to do? Do you wish to marry him?" "I do," said Rebecca, bearing Nina's gaze without dropping her own eyes for a moment. "I do wish to be the wife of Anton Trendellsohn." "Then you shall never have your wish, never. He loves me, and me only. Ask him, and he will tell you so." "I have asked him, and he has told me so." There was something so serious, so sad, and so determined in the manner of the young Jewess, that it almost cowed Nina, almost drove her to yield before her visitor. "If he has told you so," she said. Then she stopped, not wishing to triumph over her rival. "He has told me so, but I knew it without his telling. We all know it. I have not come here to deceive you, or to create false suspicions. He does love you. He cares nothing for me, and he does love you. But is he therefore to be ruined? Which had he better lose, all that he has in the world, or the girl that has taken his fancy? I would sooner lose the world twice over than lose him. Yes, but you are only a woman. Think of his position. There is not a Jew in all Prague respected among us as he is respected. He knows more, can do more, has more of wit and cleverness than any of us. We look to him to win for the Jews in Prague something of the freedom which Jews have elsewhere, in Paris and in London. If he takes a Christian for his wife, all this will be destroyed." "But all be well if he were to marry you." Now it was Rebecca's turn to pause, but it was not for long. "I love him dearly," she said, "with a love as warm as yours." "And therefore I am to be untrue to him," said Nina, again seating herself. "And were I to become his wife," continued Rebecca, not regarding the interruption, "it would be well with him in a worldly point of view. All our people will be glad, because there has been friendship between the families from of old. His father would be pleased, and he would become rich. And I also am not without some wealth of my own." "Well, I am poor," said Nina, "so poor that, look here, I can only mend my rags. There, look at my shoes. I have not another pair to my feet. But if he likes me, poor and ragged, better than he likes you, rich—" She got so far, raising her voice as she spoke, but she could get no farther, for her sobs stopped her voice. But while she was struggling to speak, the other girl rose and knelt at Nina's feet, putting her long tapering fingers upon Nina's threadbare arms, so that her forehead was almost close to Nina's lips. "He does," said Rebecca. "It is true, quite true. He loves you, poor as you are, 10 times, 100 times better than he loves me, who am not poor. You have won it altogether by yourself, with nothing of outside art to back you. You have your triumph. Will not that be enough for a life's contentment?" "No, no, no," said Nina. "No, it will not be enough." But her voice now was not altogether sorrowful. There was in it something of a wild joy which had come to her heart from the generous admission which the Jewess made. She did triumph, for she remembered that she had conquered with no other weapons than those which nature had given her. "It is more of contentment than I shall ever have," said Rebecca. "Listen to me. If you will say to me that you will release him from his promise, I will swear to you by the God whom we both worship that I will never become his wife, that he shall never touch me or speak to me in love." She had risen before she made this proposal, and now stood before Nina with one hand raised, with her blue eyes fixed upon Nina's face, and a solemnity in her manner which for a while startled Nina into silence. "You will believe my word, I am sure," said Rebecca. "Yes, I would believe you," said Nina. "Shall it be a bargain between us? Say so, and whatever is mine shall be mine and yours too. Though a Jew may not make a Christian his wife, a Jewish girl may love a Christian maiden. And then, Nina, we shall both know that we have done our very best for him whom we both love better than all the world beside." Nina was again silent, considering the proposition that had been made to her. There was one thing that she did not see, one point of view in which the matter had not been presented to her. The cause for her sacrifice had been made plain to her, but why was the sacrifice of the other also to become necessary? By not yielding she might be able to keep her lover to herself, but if she were to be induced to abandon him for his sake, so that he might not be ruined by his love for her, why in that case should he not take the other girl for his wife? In such a case Nina told herself that there would be no world left for her. There would be nothing left for her beyond the accomplishment of Lotta Luxa's prophecy. But yet, though she thought of this, though in her misery she half resolved that she would give up Anton and not exact from Rebecca the oath which the Jewess had tendered, still, in spite of that feeling, the dread of a rival's success helped to make her feel that she could never bring herself to yield. "Shall it be as I say?" said Rebecca. "And shall we, dear, be friends while we live?" "No," said Nina suddenly. "You cannot bring yourself to do so much for the man you love?" "No, I cannot. Could you throw yourself from the bridge into the Moldau and drown yourself?" "Yes," said Rebecca. "I could, if it would serve him. I think that I could do so." "What! In the dark, when it is so cold? The people would see you in the daytime." "But I would live that I might hear of his doings and see his success. Ah! I could not live without feeling that he loved me." "But what will you think of his love when it has ruined him? Will it be pleasant then? Were I to do that, then I should bethink myself of the cold river and the dark night, and the eyes of the passers by whom I should be afraid to meet in the daytime. I ask you to be as I am. Who is there that pities me? Think again, Nina. I know you would wish that he should be prosperous." Nina did think again, and thought long, and she wept, and the Jewess comforted her, and many words were said between them beyond those which had been here set down. But in the end Nina could not bring herself to say that she would give him up. For his sake had she not given up her uncle and her aunt, and St John and St Nicholas, and the very Virgin herself, whose picture she had now removed from the wall beside her bed to a dark drawer? How could she give up that which was everything she had in the world, the very life of her bosom? "I will ask him himself," she said at last hoarsely. "I will ask him, and do as he bids me. I cannot do anything unless it is as he bids me." "In this matter you must act on your own judgment, Nina." "No, I will not. I have no judgment. He must judge for me in everything. If he says it is better that we should part, then I will let him go." After this Rebecca left the room and the house. Before she went she kissed the Christian girl, but Nina did not remember that she had been kissed. Her mind was so full, not of thought, but of the suggestion that had been made to her, that it could now take no impression from anything else. She had been recommended to do a thing as her duty, as a paramount duty towards him who was everything to her, the doing of which it would be impossible that she should survive. So she told herself when she was once more alone, and had again seated herself in the chair by the window. She did not for a moment accuse Rebecca of dealing unfairly with her. It never occurred to her as possible that the Jewess had come to her with false views of her own fabrication. Had she so believed, her suspicions would have done great injustice to her rival; but no such idea presented itself to Nina's mind. All that Rebecca had said to her had come to her as though it were gospel. She did believe that Trendellsohn as a Jew would injure himself greatly by marrying a Christian. She did believe that the Jews of Prague would treat him somewhat as the Christians would treat herself. For herself such treatment would be nothing if she were but once married, but she could understand that to him it would be ruinous. And Nina believed also that Rebecca had been entirely disinterested in her mission, that she came thither not to gain a lover for herself, but to save from injury the man she loved, without reference to her own passion. Nina knew that Rebecca was strong and good, and acknowledged also that she herself was weak and selfish. She thought that she ought to have been persuaded to make the sacrifice, and once or twice she almost resolved that she would follow Rebecca to the Jew's quarter and tell her that it should be made. But she could not do it. Were she to do so, what would be left to her? With him she could bear anything, everything. To starve would hardly be bitter to her, so that his arm could be round her waist and that her head could be on his shoulder. And moreover, was she not his to do with as he pleased? After all her promises to him, how could she take upon herself to dispose of herself otherwise than as he might direct? But then some thought of the missing document came back upon her, and she remembered in her grief that he suspected her, that even now he had some frightful doubt as to her truth to him, her faith, which was, alas, alas, more firm and bright towards him than towards that heavenly friend whose aid would certainly suffice to bring her through all her troubles, if only she could bring herself to trust as she asked it. But she could trust only in him, and he doubted her. Would it not be better to do as Rebecca said, and make the most of such contentment as might come to her from her triumph over herself? That would be better, 10 times better, than to be abandoned by him, to be deserted by her Jew lover, because the Jew would not trust her, a Christian. On either side there could be nothing for her but death. But there is a choice even of deaths. If she did the thing herself, she thought that there might be something sweet even in the sadness of her last hour, something of the flavour of sacrifice. But should it be done by him, in that way there lay nothing but the madness of desolation. It was her last resolve, as she still sat at the window counting the sparrows in the yard, that she would tell him everything, and leave it to him to decide. If he would say that it was better for them to part, then he might go, and Rebecca Loth might become his wife, if he so wished it. End of chapter 10. Chapter 11 of Nina Balatka by Anthony Trollope. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Anthony Ogus. On one of these days, old Trendellsohn went to the office of Karol Zamenoy in the Ross Markt, with the full determination of learning in truth what there might be to be learned as to that deed which would be so necessary to him, or to those who would come after him, when Joseph Balatka might die. He accused himself of having been foolishly soft-hearted in his transactions with this Christian, and reminded himself from time to time that no Jew in Prague would have been so treated by any Christian. And what was the return made to him? Among them they had now secreted that of which he should have enforced the rendering before he had parted with his own money, and this they did because they knew that he would be unwilling to take harsh legal proceedings against a bedridden old man. In this frame of mind he went to the Ross Markt, and there he was assured over and over again by Ziska Zamenoy, for Karol Zamenoy was not to be seen, that Nina Balatka had the deed in her own keeping. The name of Nina Balatka was becoming very grievous to the old man. Even he, when the matter had first been broached to him, had not recognised all the evils which would come from a marriage between his son and a Christian maiden. But of late his neighbours had been around him, and he had looked into the thing, and his eyes had been opened, and he had declared to himself that he would not take a Christian girl into his house as his daughter-in-law. He could not prevent the marriage. The law would be on his son's side. The law of the Christian kingdom in which he lived allowed such marriages, and Anton, if he executed the contract which would make the marriage valid, would in truth be the girl's husband. But, and Trendellsohn, as he remembered the power which was still in his hands, almost regretted that he held it, if this thing were done, his son must go out from his house, and be his son no longer. The old man was very proud of his son. Rebecca had said truly that no Jew in Prague was so respected among Jews as Anton Trendellsohn. She might have added also that none was more highly esteemed among Christians. To lose such a son would be a loss indeed. "I will share everything with him, and he shall go away out of Bohemia," Trendellsohn had said to himself. "He has earned it, and he shall have it. He has worked for me, for us both, without asking me, his father, to bind myself with any bond. He shall have the wealth which is his own, but he shall not have it here. Ah, if he would but take that other one as his bride, he should have everything, and his father's blessing, and then he would be the first instead of the last among his people." Such was the purpose of Stephen Trendellsohn towards his son. But this, his real purpose, did not hinder him from threatening worse things. To prevent the marriage was his great object, and if threats would prevent it, why should he not use them? But now he had conceived the idea that Nina was deceiving his son, that Nina was in truth holding back the deed with some view which he could hardly fathom. Ziska Zamenoy had declared with all the emphasis in his power that the document was to the best of his belief in Nina's hands. And though Ziska's emphasis would not have gone far in convincing the Jew had the Jew's mind been turned in the other direction, now it had its effect. "And who gave it her?" Trendellsohn had asked. "Ah, there you must excuse me," Ziska had answered, "though indeed I could not tell you if I would. But we have nothing to do with the matter. We have no claim upon the houses. It is between you and the Balatkas." Then the Jew had left the Zamenoy's office and had gone home, fully believing that the deed was in Nina's hands. "Yes, it is so. She is deceiving you," he said to his son that evening. "No, father, I think not." "Very well. You will find when it is too late that my words are true. Have you ever known a Christian who thought it wrong to rob a Jew?" "I do not believe that Nina would rob me." "Ah, that is the confidence of what you call love. She is honest, you think, because she has a pretty face." "She is honest, I think, because she loves me." "Bah! Does love make men honest, or women either? Do we not see every day how these Christians rob each other in their money dealings when they are marrying? What was the girl's name? Oh, Tibolski's daughter, how they robbed her when they married her, and how her people tried their best to rob the lad she married. Did we not see it all?" "It was not the girl who did it, not the girl herself." "Why should a woman be honester than a man? I tell you, Anton, that this girl has the deed." "Ziska Zamenoy has told you so?" "Yes, he has told me. But I am not a man to be deceived because such a one as Ziska wishes to deceive me. You at least know me better than that. That which I tell you, Ziska himself believes." "But Ziska may believe wrongly." "Why should he do so? Whose interest can it be to make this thing seem so if it be not so? If the girl have the deed, you can get it more readily from her than from the Zamenoys. Believe me, Anton, the deed is with the girl." "If it be so, I shall never believe again in the truth of a human being," said the son. "Believe in the truth of your own people," said the father. "Why should you seek to be wiser than them all?" The father did not convince the son, but the words which he had spoken helped to create a doubt which already had almost an existence of its own. Anton Trendellsohn was prone to suspicions, and now was beginning to suspect Nina, although he strove hard to keep his mind free from such taint. His better nature told him that it was impossible that she should deceive him. He had read the very inside of her heart, and knew that her only delight was in his love. He understood perfectly the weakness and faith and beauty of her feminine nature, and her trusting, leaning softness was to his harder spirit as water to a thirsting man in the desert. When she clung to him, promising to obey him in everything, the touch of her hands and the sound of her voice and the beseeching glance of her loving eyes were food and drink to him. He knew that her presence refreshed him and cooled him, made him young as he was growing old, and filled his mind with sweet thoughts which hardly came to him but when she was with him. He had told himself over and over again that it must be good for him to have such a one for his wife, whether she were Jew or Christian. He knew himself to be a better man when she was with him than at other moments of his life. And then he loved her. He was thinking of her hourly, though his impatience to see her was not as hers to be with him. He loved her. But yet what if she should be deceiving him? To be able to deceive others, but never to be deceived himself, was to him unconsciously the glory which he desired. To be deceived was to be disgraced. What was all his wit and acknowledged cunning if a girl, a Christian girl, could outwit him? For himself he could see clearly enough into things to be aware that as a rule he could do better by truth than he could by falsehood. He was not prone to deceive others, but in such matters he desired ever to have the power with him to keep, as it were, the upper hand. He would fain read the hearts of others entirely, and know their wishes, and understand their schemes, whereas his own heart and his own desires and his own schemes should only be legible in part. What if, after all, he were unable to read the simple tablets of this girl's mind, tablets which he had regarded as being altogether in his own keeping? He went forth for a while, walking slowly through the streets as he thought of this, wandering without an object, but turning over in his mind his father's words. He knew that his father was anxious to prevent his marriage. He knew that every Jew around him, for now the Jews around him had all heard of it, was keenly anxious to prevent so great a disgrace. He knew all that his father had threatened, and he was well aware how complete was his father's power. But he could stand against all that, if only Nina were true to him. He would go away from Prague. What did it matter? Prague was not all the world. There were cities, better, nobler, richer than Prague, in which his brethren, the Jews, would not turn their backs upon him because he had married a Christian. It might be that he would have to begin the world again, but for that, too, he would be prepared. Nina had shown that she could bear poverty. Nina's torn boots and threadbare dress, and the utter absence of any request ever made with regard to her own comfort, had not been lost upon him. He knew how noble she was in bearing, how doubly noble she was in ever asking. If only there was nothing of deceit at the back to mar it all. He passed over the bridge, hardly knowing whither he was going, and turned directly down towards Balatka's house. As he did so he observed that certain repairs were needed in an adjoining building which belonged to his father, and determined that a mason should be sent there on the next day. Then he turned in under the archway, not passing through it into the court, and there he stood looking up at the window in which Nina's small solitary lamp was twinkling. He knew that she was sitting by the light, and that she was working. He knew that she would be raised almost to a seventh heaven of delight if he would only call her to the door and speak to her a dozen words before he returned to his home. But he had no thought of doing it. Was it possible that she should have this document in her keeping? That was the thought that filled his mind. He had bribed Lotta Luxa, and Lotta had sworn by her Christian gods that the deed was in Nina's hands. If the thing was false, why should they all conspire to tell the same falsehood? And yet he knew that they were false in their natures. Their manner, the words of each of them, betrayed something of falsehood to his well-tuned ear, to his acute eye, to his sharp senses. But with Nina, from Nina herself, everything that came from her spoke of truth. A sweet savour of honesty hung about her breath, and was a blessing to him when he was near enough to her to feel it. And yet he told himself that he was bound to doubt. He stood for some half hour in the archway, leaning against the stonework at the side, and looking up at the window where Nina was sitting. What was he to do? How should he carry himself in this special period of his life? Great ideas about the destiny of his people were mingled in his mind with suspicions as to Nina, of which he should have been, and probably was, ashamed. He would certainly take her away from Prague. He had already perceived that his marriage with a Christian would be regarded in that stronghold of prejudice in which he lived with so much animosity as to impede and perhaps destroy the utility of his career. He would go away, taking Nina with him, and he would be careful that she should never know by a word or a look that he had in any way suffered for her sake. And he swore to himself that he would be soft to her and gentle, loving her with a love more demonstrative than he had hitherto exhibited. He knew that he had been stern, exacting, and sometimes harsh. All that should be mended. He had learned her character, and perceived how absolutely she fed upon his love, and he would take care that the food should always be there, palpably there, for her sustenance. But he must try her yet once more before all this could be done for her. She must pass yet once again through the fire, and if then she should come forth as gold, she should be to him the one pure ingot which the earth contained. With how great a love would he not repay her in future days for all that she would have suffered for his sake! But she must be made to go through the fire again. He would tax her with the possession of the missing deed, and call upon her to cleanse herself from the accusation which was made against her. Once again he would be harsh with her, harsh in appearance only, in order that his subsequent tenderness might be so much more tender. She had already borne much, and she must be made to endure once again. Did not he mean to endure much for her sake? Was he not prepared to recommence the troubles and toil of his life all from the beginning, in order that she might be that life's companion? Surely he had the right to put her through the fire, and prove her as never gold was proved before. At last the little light was quenched, and Anton Trendellsohn felt that he was alone. The unseen companion of his thoughts was no longer with him, and it was useless for him to remain there standing in the archway. He blew her a kiss from his lips, and blessed her in his heart, and protested to himself that he knew she would come out of the fire pure altogether, and prove to be without dross. And then he went his way. In the meantime Nina, chill and wretched, crept to her cold bed, all unconscious of the happiness that had been so near her. "If he thinks I can be false to him, it will be better to die," she said to herself, as she drew the scanty clothing over her shivering shoulders. As she did so, her lover walked home, and having come to a resolution which was intended to be definite as to his love, he allowed his thoughts to run away with him to other subjects. After all, it would be no evil to him to leave Prague. At Prague, how little was there of progress either in thought or in things material! At Prague a Jew could earn money and become rich, might own half the city, and yet at Prague he could only live as an outcast. As regarded the laws of the land, he as a Jew might fix his residence anywhere in Prague or around Prague. He might have gardens and lands, and all the results of money. He might put his wife into a carriage twice as splendid as that which constituted the great social triumph of Madame Zamenoy. But so strong against such a mode of life were the traditional prejudices of both Jews and Christians, that any such fashion of living would be absolutely impossible to him. It would not be good for him that he should remain at Prague. Knowing his father as he did, he could not believe that the old man would be so unjust as to let him go altogether empty-handed. He had toiled and had been successful, and something of the corn which he had garnered would surely be rendered to him. With this, or if need be without it, he and his Christian wife would go forth, and see if the world was not wide enough to find them a spot on which they might live without the contempt of those around them. Though Nina had quenched her lamp and had gone to bed, it was not late when Trendellsohn reached his home, and he knew that he should find his father waiting for him. But his father was not alone. Rebecca Loth was sitting with the old man, and they had just supped together when Anton entered the room. Ruth Jacobi was also there, waiting till her friend should go before she also went to her bed. "How are you, Anton?" said Rebecca, giving her hand to the man she loved. "It is strange to see you in these days." "The strangeness, Rebecca, comes from no fault of my own. Few men, I fancy, are more constant to their homes than I am." "You sleep here and eat here, I dare say." "My business lies mostly out, about the town." "Have you been about business now, uncle Anton?" said Ruth. "Do not ask forward questions, Ruth," said the uncle. "Rebecca, I fear, teaches you to forget that you are still a child." "Do not scold her," said the old man. "She is a good girl." "It is Anton that forgets that nature is making Ruth a young woman," said Rebecca. "I do not want to be a young woman a bit before uncle Anton likes it," said Ruth. "I don't mind waiting ever so long for him. When he is married he will not care what I am." "If that be so, you may be a woman very soon," said Rebecca. "That is more than you know," said Anton, turning very sharply on her. "What do you know of my marriage, or when it will be?" "Are you scolding her too?" said the elder Trendellsohn. "Nay, father, let him do so," said Rebecca. "He has known me long enough to scold me if he thinks that I deserve it. You are gentle to me and spoil me, and it is only well that one among my old friends should be sincere enough to be ungentle." "I beg your pardon, Rebecca, if I have been uncourteous." "There can be no pardon where there is no offence." "If you are ashamed to hear of your marriage," said the father, "you should be ashamed to think of it." Then there was silence for a few seconds before any one spoke. The girls did not dare to speak after words so serious from the father to the son. It was known to both of them that Anton could hardly bring himself to bear a rebuke even from his father, and they felt that such a rebuke as this, given in their presence, would be altogether unendurable. Every one in the room understood the exact position in which each stood to the other. That Rebecca would willingly have become Anton's wife, that she had refused various offers of marriage in order that ultimately it might be so, was known to Stephen Trendellsohn, and to Anton himself, and to Ruth Jacobi. There had not been the pretence of any secret among them in the matter. But the subject was one which could hardly be discussed by them openly. "Father," said Anton, after a while, during which the black thunder cloud which had for an instant settled on his brow had managed to dispel itself without bursting into a visible storm, "Father, I am neither ashamed to think of my intended marriage nor to speak of it. There is no question of shame. But it is unpleasant to make such a subject matter of general conversation when it is a source of trouble instead of joy among us. I wish I could have made you happy by my marriage." "You will make me very wretched." "Then let us not talk about it. It cannot be altered. You would not have me false to my plighted word?" Again there was silence for some minutes, and then Rebecca spoke, the words coming from her in the lowest possible accents. "It can be altered without breach of your plighted word. Ask the young woman what she herself thinks. You will find that she knows that you are both wrong." "Of course she knows it," said the father. "I will ask her nothing of the kind," said the son. "It would be of no use," said Ruth. After this Rebecca rose to take her leave, saying something of the falseness of her brother Samuel, who had promised to come for her and to take her home. "But he is with Miriam Harter," said Rebecca, "and of course he will forget me." "I will go home with you," said Anton. "Indeed you shall not. Do you think I cannot walk alone through our own streets in the dark without being afraid?" "I am well aware that you are afraid of nothing; but nevertheless, if you will allow me, I will accompany you." There was no sufficient cause for her to refuse his company, and the two left the house together. As they descended the stairs, Rebecca determined that she would have the first word in what might now be said between them. She had suggested that this marriage with the Christian girl might be abandoned without the disgrace upon Anton of having broken his troth, and she had therefore laid herself open to a suspicion of having worked for her own ends, of having done so with unmaidenly eagerness to gratify her own love. Something on the subject must be said, would be said by him if not by her, and therefore she would explain herself at once. She spoke as soon as she found herself by his side in the street. "I regretted what I said upstairs, Anton, as soon as the words were out of my mouth." "I do not know that you said anything to regret." "I told you that if in truth you thought this marriage to be wrong, which I do not, pardon me, my friend, for a moment. If you had so thought, I said that there was a mode of escape without falsehood or disgrace. In saying so, I must have seemed to urge you to break away from Nina Balatka." "You are all urging me to do that." Coming from the others, such advice cannot even seem to have an improper motive." Here she paused, feeling the difficulty of her task, aware that she could not conclude it without an admission which no woman willingly makes. But she shook away the impediment, bracing herself to the work, and went on steadily with her speech. "Coming from me, such motive may be imputed, nay, it must be imputed." "No motive is imputed that is not believed by me to be good and healthy and friendly. Our friends," continued Rebecca, "have wished that you and I should be husband and wife. That is now impossible." "It is impossible because Nina will be my wife." "It is impossible whether Nina should become your wife or should not become your wife. I do not say this from any girlish pride. Before I knew that you loved a Christian woman, I would willingly have been, as our friends wished. You see, I can trust you enough for candour. When I was young they told me to love you, and I obeyed them. They told me that I was to be your wife, and I taught myself to be happy in believing them. I now know that they were wrong, and I will endeavour to teach myself another happiness." "Rebecca, if I have been in fault—" "You have never been in fault. You are by nature too stern to fall into such faults. It has been my misfortune, perhaps rather I should say my difficulty, that till of late you have given me no sign by which I could foresee my lot. I was still young, and I still believed what they told me, even though you did not come to me as lovers come. Now I know it all, and as any such thoughts, or wishes if you will, as those I used to have can never return to me, I may perhaps be felt by you to be free to use what liberty of counsel old friendship may give me. I know you will not misunderstand me, and that is all. Do not come further with me." He called to her, but she was gone, escaping from him with quick running feet through the dark night, and he returned to his father's house, thinking of the girl that had left him. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12 of Nina Balatka by Anthony Trollope. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Anthony Ogus. Again some days passed by without any meeting between Nina and her lover, and things were going very badly with the Balatkas in the old house. The money that had come from the jeweller was not indeed all expended, but Nina looked upon it as her last resource till marriage should come to relieve her, and the time of her marriage seemed to be as far from her as ever. So the Kreutzers were husbanded as only a woman can husband them, and new attempts were made to reduce the little expenses of the little household. "Souchey, you had better go. You had indeed," said Nina. "We cannot feed you." Now Souchey had himself spoken of leaving them some days since, urged to do so by his Christian indignation at the abominable betrothal of his mistress. "You said the other day that you would do so, and it will be better." "But I shall not." "Then you will be starved." "I am starved already, and it cannot be worse. I dined yesterday on what they threw out to the dogs in the meat market." "And where will you dine to day?" "Ah, I shall dine better to day. I shall get a meal in the Wimberg Gasse." "What, at my aunt's house?" "Yes, at your aunt's house. They live well there, even in the kitchen. Lotta will have for me some hot soup, a mess of cabbage, and a sausage. I wish I could bring it away from your aunt's house to the old man and yourself." "I would sooner fall in the gutter than eat my aunt's meat." "That's all very fine for you, but I'm not going to marry a Jewess. Why should I quarrel with your aunt, or with Lotta Luxa? If you would give up the Jew, Nina, your aunt's house would be open to you. Yes, and Ziska's house." "I will not give up the Jew," said Nina, with flashing eyes. "I suppose not. But what will you do when he gives you up? What if Ziska then should not be so forward?" "Of all those who are my enemies, and whom I hate because they are so cruel, I hate Ziska the worst. Go and tell him so, since you are becoming one of them. In doing so much you cannot at any rate do me harm." Then she took herself off, forgetting in her angry spirit the prudential motives which had induced her to begin the conversation with Souchey. But Souchey, though he was going to Madame Zamenoy's house to get his dinner, and was looking forward with much eagerness to the mess of hot cabbage and the cold sausage, had by no means become one of them in the Windberg gasse. He had had more than one interview of late with Lotta Luxa, and had perceived that something was going on of which he much desired to be at the bottom. Lotta had some scheme which she was half willing and half unwilling to reveal to him, by which she hoped to prevent the threatened marriage between Nina and the Jew. Now Souchey was well enough inclined to take a part in such a scheme, provided it did not in any way make him a party with the Zamenoys in things general against the Balatkas. It was his duty as a Christian, though he himself was rather slack in the performance of his own religious duties, to put a stop to this horrible marriage if he could do so, but it behoved him to be true to his master and mistress, and especially true to them in opposition to the Zamenoys. He had in some sort been carrying on a losing battle against the Zamenoys all his life, and had some of the feelings of a martyr, telling himself that he had lost a rich wife by doing so. He would go on this occasion and eat his dinner and be very confidential with Lotta, but he would be very discreet, would learn more than he told, and above all would not betray his master or mistress. Soon after he was gone, Anton Trendellsohn came over to the Kleinseite, and ringing at the bell of the house, received admission from Nina herself. "What, you, Anton?" she said, almost jumping into his arms, and then restraining herself. "Will you come up? It is so long since I have seen you." "Yes, it is long. I hope the time is soon coming when there shall be no more of such separation." "Is it? Is it indeed?" "I trust it is." "I suppose as a maiden I ought to be coy, and say that I would prefer to wait. But, dearest love, sorrow and trouble have banished all that. You will not love me less because I tell you that I count the minutes till I may be your wife?" "No, I do not love you less on that account. I would have you be true and faithful in all things." Though the words themselves were assuring, there was something in the tone of his voice which repressed her. "To you I am true and faithful in all things, as faithful as though you were already my husband. What were you saying of a time that is soon coming?" He did not answer her question, but turned the subject away into another channel. "I have brought something for you," he said, "something which I hope you will be glad to have." "Is it a present?" she asked. As yet he had never given her anything that she could call a gift, and it was to her almost a matter of pride that she had taken nothing from her Jew lover, and that she would take nothing till it should be her right to take everything. "Hardly a present, but you shall look at it as you will. You remember Rapinsky, do you not?" Now Rapinsky was the jeweller in the Grosser Ring, and Nina, though she well remembered the man and the shop, did not at the moment remember the name. "You will not have forgotten this at any rate," said Trendellsohn, bringing the necklace from out of his pocket. "How did you get it?" said Nina, not putting out her hand to take it, but looking at it as it lay upon the table. "I thought you would be glad to have it back again." "I should be glad if—" "If what? Will it be less welcome because it comes through my hands?" "The man lent me money upon it, and you must have paid the money." "What if I have? I like your pride, Nina, but be not too proud. Of course I have paid the money. I know Rapinsky, who deals with us often. I went to him after you spoke to me, and got it back again. There is your mother's necklace." "I am sorry for this, Anton." "Why sorry?" "We are so poor that I shall be driven to take it elsewhere again. I cannot keep such a thing in the house while father wants. But better he should want than—" "Than what, Nina?" "There would be something like cheating in borrowing money on the same thing twice." "Then put it by, and I will be your lender." "No, I will not borrow from you. You are the only one in the world that I could never repay. I cannot borrow from you. Keep this thing, and if I am ever your wife, then you shall give it me." "If you are ever my wife?" "Is there no room for such an if? I hope there is not, Anton. I wish it were as certain as the sun's rising. But people around us are so cruel. It seems sometimes as though the world were against us. And then you yourself—" "What of me myself, Nina?" "I do not think you trust me altogether, and unless you trust me, I know you will not make me your wife." "That is certain, and yet I do not doubt that you will be my wife." But do you trust me? Do you believe in your heart of hearts that I know nothing of that paper for which you are searching?" She paused for reply, but he did not at once make any. "Tell me," she went on saying with energy, "are you sure that I am true to you in that matter as in all others? Though I was starving, and it is nearly so with me already, and though I loved you beyond even all heaven, as I do, I would not become your wife if you doubted me in any tittle. Say that you doubt me, and then it shall be all over." Still he did not speak. "Rebecca Loth will be a fitter wife for you than I can be," said Nina. "If you are not my wife, I shall never have a wife," said Trendellsohn. In her ecstasy of delight, as she heard these words, she took up his hand and kissed it, but she dropped it again as she remembered that she had not yet received the assurance that she needed. "But you do believe me about this horrid paper?" It was necessary that she should be made to go again through the fire. In deliberate reflection he had made himself aware that such necessity still existed. It might be that she had some inner reserve as to duty towards her father. There was possibly some reason which he could not fathom why she should still keep something back from him in this matter. He did not in truth think that it was so, but there was the chance. There was the chance, and he could not bear to be deceived. He felt assured that Ziska Zamenoy and Lotta Luxa believed that this deed was in Nina's keeping. Indeed, he was assured that all the household of the Zamenoys so believed. "If there be God above us, it is there," Lotta had said, crossing herself. He did not think it was there. He thought that Lotta was wrong, and that all the Zamenoys were wrong by some mistake which he could not fathom. But still there was the chance, and Nina must be made to bear this additional calamity. "Do you think it impossible," said he, "that you should have it among your own things?" "What, without knowing that I have it?" she asked. "It may have come to you with other papers," he said, "and you may not quite have understood its nature." "There, in that desk, is every paper that I have in the world. You can look if you suspect me, but I shall not easily forgive you for looking." Then she threw down the key of her desk upon the table. He took it up and fingered it, but did not move towards the desk. "The greatest treasure there," she said, "are scraps of your own, which I have been a fool to value, as they have come from a man who does not trust me." He knew that it would be useless for him to open the desk. If she was secreting anything from him, she was not hiding it there. "Might it not possibly be among your clothes?" he asked. "I have no clothes," she answered, and then strode off across the wide room towards the door of her father's apartment. But after she had grasped the handle of the door, she turned again upon her lover. "It may, however, be well that you should search my chamber and my bed. If you will come with me, I will show you the door. You will find it to be a sorry place for one who was your affianced bride." "Who is my affianced bride?" said Trendellsohn. "No, sir, who was, but is so no longer. You will have to ask my pardon at my feet before I will let you speak to me again as my lover. Go and search. Look for your deed, and then you shall see that I will tear out my own heart rather than submit to the ill usage of distrust from one who owes me so much faith as you do." "Nina," he said. "Well, sir?" "I do trust you." "Yes, with a half trust, with one eye closed while the other is watching me. You think you have so conquered me that I will be good to you, and yet cannot keep yourself from listening to those who whisper that I am bad to you. Sir, I fear they have been right when they told me that a Jew's nature would surely shock me at last." The dark frowning cloud, which he had so often observed with fear, came upon his brow. But she did not fear him now. "And do you too taunt me with my religion?" he said. "No, not so. Not with your religion, Anton, but with your nature." "And how can I help my nature?" "I suppose you cannot help it, and I am wrong to taunt you. I should not have taunted you. I should only have said that I will not endure the suspicion either of a Christian or of a Jew." He came up to her now, and put out his arm as though he were about to embrace her. "No," she said, "not again, till you have asked my pardon for distrusting me, and have given me your solemn word that you distrust me no longer." He paused a moment in doubt, then put his hat on his head and prepared to leave her. She had behaved very well, but still he would not be weak enough to yield to her in everything at once. As to opening her desk or going upstairs into her room, that he felt to be quite impossible. Even his nature did not admit of that. But neither did his nature allow him to ask her pardon and to own that he had been wrong. She had said that he must implore her forgiveness at her feet. One word, however, one look would have sufficed. But that word and that look were, at the present moment, out of his power. "Good bye, Nina," he said. "It is best that I should leave you now." "By far the best. And you will take the necklace with you, if you please." "No, I will leave that. I cannot keep a trinket that was your mother's." "Take it then to the jeweller's, and get back your money. It shall not be left here. I will have nothing from your hands." He was so far cowed by her manner that he took up the necklace and left the house, and Nina was once more alone. What they had told her of her lover was after all true. That was the first idea that occurred to her as she sat in her chair, stunned by the sorrow that had come upon her. They had dinned into her ears their accusations, not against the man himself, but against the tribe to which he belonged, telling her that a Jew was, of his very nature, suspicious, greedy, and false. She had perceived early in her acquaintance with Anton Trendellsohn that he was clever, ambitious, gifted with the power of thinking as none others whom she knew could think, and that he had words at his command, and was brave, and was endowed with a certain nobility of disposition which prompted him to wish for great results rather than for small advantages. All this had conquered her, and had made her resolve to think that a Jew could be as good as a Christian. But now, when the trial of the man had in truth come, she found that those around her had been right in what they had said. How base must be the nature which could prompt a man to suspect a girl who had been true to him, as Nina had been true to her lover. She would never see him again, never. He had left the room without even answering the question which she had asked him. He would not even say that he trusted her. It was manifest that he did not trust her, and that he believed at this moment that she was endeavouring to rob him in this matter of the deed. He had asked her if she had it in her desk or among her clothes, and her very soul revolted from the suspicion so implied. She would never speak to him again. It was all over. No, she would never willingly speak to him again. But what would she do? For a few minutes she fell back, as is so natural with mortals in trouble, upon that religion which she had been so willing to outrage by marrying the Jew. She went to a little drawer and took out a string of beads which had lain there unused since she had been made to believe that the Virgin and the saints would not permit her marriage with Anton Trendellsohn. She took out the beads, but she did not use them. She passed no berries through her fingers to check the number of prayers said, for she found herself unable to say any prayer at all. If he would come back to her and ask her pardon, ask it in truth at her feet, she would still forgive him, regardless of the Virgin and the saints. And if he did not come back, what was the fate that Lotta Luxa had predicted for her, and to which she had acknowledged to herself that she would be driven to submit? In either case, how could she again come to terms with St. John and St. Nicholas? And how was she to live? Should she lose her lover, as she now told herself would certainly be her fate, what possibility of life was left to her? From day to day and from week to week she had put off to a future hour any definite consideration of what she and her father should do in their poverty, believing that it might be postponed till her marriage would make all things easy. Her future mode of living had often been discussed between her and her lover, and she had been candid enough in explaining to him that she could not leave her father desolate. He had always replied that his wife's father should want for nothing, and she had been delighted to think that she could with joy accept that from her husband which nothing would induce her to accept from her lover. This thought had sufficed to comfort her, as the evil of absolute destitution was close upon her. Surely the day of her marriage would come soon. But now it seemed to her to be certain that the day of her marriage would never come. All those expectations must be banished, and she must look elsewhere, if elsewhere there might be any relief. She knew well that if she would separate herself from the Jew, the pocket of her aunt would be opened to relieve the distress of her father, would be opened so far as to save the old man from perishing of want. Aunt Sophie, if duly invoked, would not see her sister's husband die of starvation. Nay, Aunt Sophie would doubtless so far stretch her Christian charity as to see that her niece was in some way fed, if that niece would be duly obedient. Further still, Aunt Sophie would accept her niece as the very daughter of her house, as the rising mistress of her own establishment, if that niece would only consent to love her son. Ziska was there as a husband in Anton's place, if Ziska might only gain acceptance. But Nina, as she rose from her chair and walked backwards and forwards through her chamber, telling herself all these things, clenched her fist and stamped her foot as she swore to herself that she would dare all that the saints could do to her, that she would face all the terrors of the black dark river before she would succumb to her cousin Ziska. As she worked herself into wrath, thinking now of the man she loved, and then of the man she did not love, she thought that she could willingly perish, if it were not that her father lay there so old and so helpless. Gradually, as she magnified to herself the terrible distresses of her heart, the agony of her yearning love for a man who, though he loved her, was so unworthy of her perfect faith, she began to think that it would be well to be carried down by the quick, eternal, almighty stream beyond the reach of the sorrow which encompassed her. When her father should leave her, she would be all alone, alone in the world, without a friend to regard her, or one living human being on whom she, a girl, might rely for protection, shelter, or even for a morsel of bread. Would St. Nicholas cover her from the contumely of the world, or would St. John of the Bridges feed her? Did she in her heart of hearts believe that even the Virgin would assist her in such a strait? No, she had no such belief. It might be that such real belief had never been hers. She hardly knew. But she did know that now, in the hour of her deep trouble, she could not say her prayers and tell her beads and trust valiantly that the goodness of heaven would suffice to her in her need. In the meantime Souchey had gone off to the Windberggasse and had gladdened himself with the soup, with the hot mess of cabbage and the sausage supplied by Madame Zamenoy's hospitality. The joys of such a moment are unknown to any but those who, like Souchey, have been driven by circumstances to sit at tables very ill supplied. On the previous day he had fed upon offal thrown away from a butcher's stall, and habit had made such feeding not unfamiliar to him. As he walked from the Kleinseite through the old town to Madame Zamenoy's bright-looking house in the new town, he had comforted himself greatly with thoughts of the coming feast. The representation which his imagination made to him of the banquet sufficed to produce happiness, and he went along hardly envying any man. His propensities at the moment were the propensities of a beast, and yet he was submitting himself to the terrible poverty which made so small a matter now a matter of joy to him, because there was a something of nobility within him which made him true to the master who had been true to him, when they had both been young together. Even now he resolved, as he sharpened his teeth, that through all the soup and all the sausage he would be true to the Balatkas. He would be true even to Nina Balatka, though he recognised it as a paramount duty to do all in his power to save her from the Jew. He was seated at the table in the kitchen almost as soon as he had entered the house in the Windberggasse, and found his plate full before him. Lotta had felt that there was no need of the delicacy of compliment in feeding a man who was so undoubtedly hungry, and she had therefore bade him at once fall to. "A hearty meal is a thing you are not used to," she had said, "and it will do your old bones a deal of good." The address was not complimentary, especially as coming from a lady in regard to whom he entertained tender feelings, but Souchey forgave the something of coarse familiarity which the words displayed, and seating himself on the stool before the victuals, gave play to the feelings of the moment. "There's no one to measure what's left of the sausage," said Lotta, instigating him to new feats. "Ain't there now?" said Souchey, responding to the sound of the trumpet. "I always thought she had the devil's own eye in looking after what was used in the kitchen." "The devil himself winks sometimes," said Lotta, cutting another half-inch off from the unconsumed fragment, and picking the skin from the meat with her own fair fingers. Hitherto Souchey had been regardless of any such niceness in his eating, the skin having gone with the rest; but now he thought that the absence of the outside covering and the touch of Lotta's fingers were grateful to his appetite. "Souchey," said Lotta, when he had altogether done and had turned his stool round to the kitchen fire, "where do you think Nina would go if she were to marry a Jew?" There was an abrupt solemnity in the manner of the question which at first baffled the man, whose breath was heavy with the comfortable repletion which had been bestowed upon him. "Where would she go to?" he said, repeating Lotta's words. "Yes, Souchey, where would she go to? Where would be her eternal home? What would become of her soul? Do you know that not a priest in Prague would give her absolution, though she were on her dying bed? Oh, Holy Mary, it's a terrible thing to think of. It's bad enough for the old man and her to be there day after day without a morsel to eat, and I suppose if it were not for Anton Trendellsohn it would be bad enough with them." "Not a gulden, then, has Nina ever taken from the Jew, nor the value of a gulden, as far as I can judge between them." "What matters that, Souchey? Is she not engaged him as his wife? Can anything in the world be so dreadful? Don't you know she'll be damned for ever and ever?" Lotta, as she uttered the terrible words, brought her face close to Souchey's, looking into his eyes with a fierce glare. Souchey shook his head sorrowfully, owning thereby that his knowledge in the matter of religion did not go to the point indicated by Lotta Luxa. "And wouldn't anything then be a good deed that would prevent that?" "It's a priest that should do it among them." "But the priests are not the men they used to be, Souchey, and it is not exactly their fault neither. There are so many folks about in these days who care nothing who goes to glory and who does not, and they are too many for the priests." "If the priests can't fight their own battle, I can't fight it for them," said Souchey. "But for the old family, Souchey, that you have known so long? Look here, you and I between us can prevent it." "And how is it to be done?" "Ah, that's the question. If I felt that I was talking to a real Christian that had a care for the poor girl's soul, I would tell you in a moment." "So I am. Only her soul isn't my business." "Then I cannot tell you this. I can't do it unless you acknowledge that her welfare as a Christian is the business of us all. Fancy, Souchey, your mistress married to a filthy Jew." "For the matter of that, he isn't so filthy neither." "An abominable Jew. But, Souchey, she will never fall out with him. We must contrive that he shall quarrel with her. If she had a thing about her that he did not want her to have, couldn't you contrive that he should know it?" "What sort of thing? Do you mean another lover like?" "No, you gander. If there was anything of that sort, I can manage it myself. But if she had a thing locked up, away from him, couldn't you manage to show it to him? He's very generous in rewarding, you know." "I don't want to have anything to do with it," said Souchey, getting up from his stool and preparing to take his departure. Though he had been so keen after the sausage, he was above taking a bribe in such a matter as this. "Stop, Souchey, stop. I didn't think that I should ever have to ask anything of you in vain." Then she put her face very close to his, so that her lips touched his ear, and she laid her hand heavily upon his arm, and she was very confidential. Souchey listened to the whisper till his face grew longer and longer. "'Tis for a soul," said Lotta, "for a poor soul's sake. When you can save her by raising your hand, would you let her be damned for ever?" But she could exact no promise from Souchey, except that he would keep faith with her, and that he would consider deeply the proposal made to him. Then there was a tender farewell between them, and Souchey returned to the Kleinseite. End of chapter 12.